truly on BFO 2.0. So let me just give you some background first of all. One of the features of BFO 2.0 that we take very seriously is that we should have a first-order logic axiomatization of the whole of BFO 2.0. And we should have an OWL axiomatization, which is a subset, or whatever the correct terminology is, of the first-order logic axiomatization, as far as we can manage anyway. And both of which are captured in the document, which is the user guide and specification. Now, you should all have copies of the handout with links to the OWL the OWL and the user guide. We will be releasing a review version of the first-order logic very soon, and anyone who wants to see what we have already, which I think is pretty good, can send me an email and I will send it.
It's in my slides.
It's in his slides. Good. Now, the reason why we distinguish between elucidations and definitions is because we take very seriously a point made by Aristotle that you can't define everything, because to define something is to explain it in simpler terms, and if you have to explain everything in yet simpler terms, then you would be infinitely involved in ever simpler and simpler definitions. And at some point you have to say, well, now we've reached the limit of simplicity that we can cope with. And at that point, you can't define, but you can elucidate. For instance, by giving a list of examples, by giving references to the literature, and by trying to explain as best you can the meanings of the words. And so we very carefully mark those things which are elucidations and those things which are definitions.
Well, actually, if you wind up looking at the document, we're not as careful as we should be.
Okay,
we intend
we
are to be very careful about
we are asymptotically approaching a point where we completely successfully label the distinction between them.
I would also add that it would be...
It has the disposition to pump, which it does, because of the physics of my heart. And what this means is that if my heart's function ceases to exist, then I must be physically changed. For instance, I die, and my heart is destroyed. Now, a function is a special kind of disposition. If someone has a better definition of function, I would really like to hear it, but it seems that this works. It's not anything I'm particularly proud of, but it seems to work. So a function, because it's a special kind of disposition, is an internally grounded realizable entity, but it's a special kind of internally grounded realizable entity. Namely, it's the sort of entity which exists, it's the sort of entity whose bearer exists because something to perform this, to realize in this way, was needed. So your heart exists because something was needed to pump blood. That's a quick summary of the evolution of the heart.
Quick comments, Barry?
Yeah.
So this is not an either-or, right? So one of the reasons that we landed up formulating this is because there were many processes, at least in our field, which had both evolution and intentional design combined.
Yeah.
The guided optimization of an enzyme, for example.
Yeah. So I don't like and or. But think of that as an and or. So people at the back are pulling a face, so you can have 5 seconds to... No?
I didn't like your definition of evolution. Your heart doesn't pump.
I know, I said it was a summary of a very long story. Maybe it's not even a value.
It's not a good summary, it's too teleological for evolution.
I know. Yeah? Well, so that we do indeed have information artifacts. Remember that part of what we're doing here is Humpty Dumpty. So we're just going to use the word function to mean a function of a physical entity. But it may very well be that there are non-physical entities which are analogously functional. We just would need another word.
It's not to say non-physical. I mean, you can have a certain constructed function
So the role, that would be a job for roles, unfortunately. So let's suppose that we have a chairman of a committee. The function of the chairman is to do this or that. I don't think that's true. So, and you wouldn't think it true if we told you your function in life, the reason why you are here is so that you can be the chair of this committee. That's what we need to function according to this definition. So it's a role-y thing.
It depends on what his parents want it for.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Maybe his parents.
Then his parents
Or
are...
be president.
So how do you stand on slavery?
It's real.
Alan?
So I think that this is actually a fair discussion to have because, first of all, we don't have a function. We have many functions.
No, we don't have any functions. So it's
may have
insulting.
anything that has functions may have more than one function.
Good.
And there are selection processes, for example, elections, that might be analogous to how we define functions. So I would just say that within our community, there is still some discussion about this matter.
So one of the driving forces behind BFO is that it has to be a single inheritance hierarchy, which means that if you make a case for functions of processes, for instance, then you would need to find another word. You can't use the same word for functions of independent continuance as you would use for functions of entities which are disjoint from independent continuance. That's just the rule. It's a trivial rule. It's like using the QWERTY typewriter keyboard. You can't argue for it, but you better do it. Larry?
So, because of the evolutionary piece here, human beings, or living things, have at least two functions: to metabolize and to reproduce. The evolution gave those. If you didn't have
So I just don't buy it.
it seems to fit.
It's not your function to metabolize, it's your destiny or something. I don't want to use the word destiny either.
Yeah,
No, I don't think it makes sense. It's an instance of the universal pumping function. So it's a continuum. But the realization of this function is a pumping